The medieval world was a place of shadows, whispers, and secrets. By day, the bustling streets of castles and towns hummed with life merchants shouting their wares, blacksmiths hammering away in the glow of forge fires, and nobles flaunting their wealth with processions and elaborate attire. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness crept across the stone walls, a different world awakened, one few outside the castle walls ever truly witnessed. Nighttime in the medieval era was not merely the absence of light. It was an entirely separate realm, filled with rituals, fears, and unspoken rules. Unlike our modern society, where electric lights push back the darkness and convenience defines our schedules, medieval nights were long, unpredictable, and often dangerous. Those who controlled the castles, the monarchs, their advisors, and their closest confidants lived under an unusual tension, a perpetual negotiation between rest and vigilance. Sleep, it turns out, was never a simple necessity. It was a carefully guarded treasure, a fragile state easily disturbed by suspicion, superstition, or the faintest whisper of danger. Imagine a medieval castle on a chilly autumn evening. The wind rattles the narrow windows, carrying distant cries from the town below. Inside the massive stone walls, the royal chambers glimmer faintly by candlelight. Yet for the king and queen, night is rarely a time of peace. Guards patrol the corridors, listening for the softest footstep. Courtiers whisper behind tapestries, plotting and scheming, even while the rulers attempt to rest. In this world, night is both a time of vulnerability and a stage for secret dramas that would shape the fate of kingdoms. The architecture of medieval castles itself reveals the mindset of their occupants. Thick stone walls, narrow windows, and labyrinthine passageways weren't built solely for defense during daytime sieges. They were designed to maintain control during the long hours of darkness. The castle was alive at night. Fires flickered in hidden chambers. The scent of herbs used to ward off disease or spirits wafted through corridors. Even the chambers themselves were more than places for sleep. They were arenas of strategy, privacy, and occasionally, terror. Kings and queens had peculiar relationships with sleep. Some found comfort in long stretches of slumber, tucked beneath layers of furs and silken sheets. Others treated sleep almost as an interruption, a vulnerability to be endured. Diaries, letters, and chronicles hinted monarchs waking multiple times in a single night, checking locks, sending messages to loyal guards, or consulting astrologers about dreams. Superstition was never far from the royal bed. A bad dream might dictate the day's decisions, and omens interpreted in the dark could sway policies, or even the lives of those who dared to enter the castle after curfew. But the nights weren't only about paranoia or ritual. They were also a theater of human emotion, ambition, and folly. Secret rendezvous in shadowed corridors, whispered negotiations, and the faint rustle of conspirators plotting a coup, all of these were nocturnal realities that coexisted with the quiet attempts at rest. For the sleepless historian, who seeks to understand the medieval world beyond chronicles of wars and royal decrees, these moments are where the era truly breathes. The night exposes human fragility and the intricate web of politics, belief, and instinct. The common folk experienced the night differently. Without candles or oil lamps, villages plunged into near complete darkness. Fires and hearths provided warmth and light, but they barely penetrated the shadows. People went to bed early, rising with the sun, but the uncertainty of what lurked in the night, wolves, thieves, or disease, was ever present. Some slept outdoors in fields, guarding livestock, while others huddled inside cottages, often sharing beds for warmth. Yet even for these ordinary lives, night was a mixture of rest, fear, and occasional superstition. Tales of spirits, demons, or mysterious noises passed down through generations created an invisible presence in every household. In royal courts, however, the stakes were infinitely higher. Nighttime mistakes could cost lives, property, or even the crown itself. Assassins and spies thrived in darkness. Laws and etiquette dictated behavior by day, but at night, deception often held more power than legitimacy. The monarch's awareness of this fact infused their nights with tension. A king might pretend to sleep, listening intently as pages brought messages. A queen might rise to check on her children, her mind racing through potential threats, both real and imagined. Medical knowledge of the era also influenced nocturnal life. Illnesses were poorly understood, and remedies were as much superstition as science. Some rulers drank concoctions believed to enhance alertness or ward off evil spirits, while others followed complex routines to ensure they slept correctly, often resulting in fragmented or shallow sleep. The line between health, ritual, and paranoia was thin, and medieval nights often blurred it entirely. It is easy, from a modern perspective, to romanticize these nights as mysterious or exotic. Candles glowing, tapestries swaying in drafts, the smell of burning herbs, the soft murmur of voices, these are cinematic images. Yet the truth was harsher. Sleep was precious, and the night was dangerous. It was a period of heightened awareness, constant tension, and unpredictable events. Those who succeeded in navigating these hours often left legacies remembered in history. Those who failed disappeared into obscurity or tragedy. As we begin our exploration of medieval nights, we will travel beyond dry historical accounts and enter the intimate spaces where power, fear, and humanity intersected. We will see kings who feared their own shadows, queens who relied on the stars for guidance, and courtiers who plotted under candlelight. The night reveals the hidden rhythms of a world both strange and familiar, a world that shaped our history in ways still felt today. In the chapters to come, we will journey deeper into the royal chambers, uncover nighttime rituals, explore the role of superstition and medicine, and witness the fragile balance between rest and vigilance. Each story, each anecdote, is a thread in the tapestry of medieval life at night, a tapestry woven with fear, desire, strategy, and survival. By the time our journey concludes, you will understand why the night in medieval Europe was never truly dark. It was illuminated by the flicker of candles, the glint of steel, and the restless minds of those who ruled. And as the sleepless historian, you will discover that the night holds more than sleep. It holds the secrets of a world that never truly rested. The royal chambers of a medieval castle were more than just sleeping quarters. They were the heart of power, secrecy, and intrigue. Every stone, every tapestry, every lock had a purpose, and none of it was accidental. To the casual observer, these rooms might have appeared luxurious, with ornate beds draped in silks and furs, intricate carvings on the walls, and the faint scent of incense lingering in the air. But to those who truly understood medieval life, the chambers were fortified stages for vigilance, strategy, and at times, paranoia. Imagine a king stepping into his private chambers after a long day of council meetings and public appearances. The corridors leading to the room are silent, but alive with watchful eyes. Guards patrol at irregular intervals, listening for the softest sounds, a creak in the floorboards, the rustle of a curtain, or the faintest whisper of a conspirator. The monarch's bedroom is not simply a place of rest. It is a command center in miniature, a space where power is protected and secrets are guarded. Beds were not merely for sleeping. They were symbols of authority and status. Kings often slept under canopies, heavily embroidered with symbols of their reign. Curtains could be drawn around the bed, providing privacy but also creating a trap if an intruder were to enter. Some monarchs slept with weapons hidden nearby, believing that even in the supposed safety of their chambers, danger lurked. The idea that the bedroom could be a site of assassination was not unfounded. History records multiple instances where rulers were struck down in what should have been their most private space. The chambers were also sites of ritual. Monarchs often followed strict bedtime routines, not unlike the modern practice of wind-down rituals, but infinitely more elaborate. Herbal concoctions were prepared to aid sleep or, in some cases, to ensure the mind remained alert. Candles were arranged strategically, their flickering light believed to ward off evil spirits or to influence dreams. Some rulers consulted astrologers or priests before retiring, seeking divine guidance for decisions that would be made the following day. In these private spaces, the boundaries between superstition, politics, and personal habit blurred, creating an atmosphere both intimate and tense. Courtiers and servants were constantly moving in and out of the chambers, though their presence was carefully regulated. Trusted attendants could bring messages, adjust the fire, or prepare nighttime meals, but outsiders were rarely permitted. Even a minor intrusion could trigger alarm. Loyalty was constantly tested, and betrayal was a shadow that loomed over every gesture. The corridors outside the chamber were alive with whispers, many of which were invisible to the monarch, but deadly in their consequences. A single overheard word could lead to execution, exile, or ruin, making the night a silent battlefield of strategy and caution. Privacy in the medieval chambers was a complicated affair. While modern bedrooms are considered sanctuaries, medieval rulers had to balance personal comfort with constant vigilance. Some kings practiced segmented sleep, dividing the night into multiple periods with intermittent wakefulness. Each waking period was an opportunity to check on the security of the castle, to receive late-night counsel, or to attend to personal matters under the veil of darkness. Queens, too, followed intricate nighttime routines, ensuring the safety of their children, preparing medicines, and maintaining alliances through subtle, whispered negotiations. The night became a continuum of small yet crucial actions, each with consequences that could ripple through the court by morning. Even the architecture of the chambers reflected the demands of vigilance. Narrow passages and hidden alcoves allowed guards to move unseen. Secret doors and escape routes were integrated into the walls, offering a monarch a means to flee or to spy without detection. Every detail, from the placement of a chair to the height of a windowsill, served both function and security. The room was a puzzle, a living system designed to keep the ruler in command while simultaneously safeguarding against unseen threats. Yet despite all these precautions, the nights were not always peaceful. Accounts from chroniclers reveal kings and queens waking suddenly, heart pounding, convinced of imminent danger. Shadows cast by flickering candles could appear as enemies. The slightest noise, a distant footstep, the flap of a curtain, or even the whistle of the wind might trigger panic. Many rulers were plagued by insomnia, whether due to stress, superstition, or the very nature of their responsibilities. This perpetual tension created a unique psychological environment, one where rest and alertness were inseparable, and where the boundary between dream and reality often blurred. The royal chambers were also arenas for private counsel. Midnight meetings with advisors, secret discussions with envoys, or clandestine gatherings with allies often took place here. These interactions, shielded from the eyes of the public, and even most of the court, could determine the fate of kingdoms. The night offered a level of discretion impossible to achieve during the day, when halls echoed with the chatter of servants and courtiers. In this way, darkness became both a tool and a weapon, shaping the political landscape in ways unseen by historians who focus solely on daylight events. Food and drink played a curious role in nighttime life as well. While modern sleep practices emphasize fasting or light meals before bed, medieval monarchs sometimes consumed elaborate dishes late at night. This was partly ritual, partly practical. Meals were often delivered to the chambers in silence, allowing rulers to dine while remaining alert. Wine, ale, and herbal infusions could serve both as indulgence and as aids for vigilance or sleep, depending on the recipe and the intended effect. Even what might seem mundane, what a king ate before bed, was meticulously recorded, as it could influence health, mood, and the decisions made in the fragile hours of the night. Despite the apparent luxury of these rooms, fear remained ever present. The chambers, for all their comfort and beauty, were also arenas of anxiety. Dreams were not always harmless. They could be interpreted as omens, portents of betrayal or disaster. Chroniclers recount rulers rising in the middle of the night, feverish and alert, acting upon a dream that later proved to be eerily accurate. The interplay between superstition, psychology, and politics was constant, creating nights that were never truly restful. The royal chambers, in essence, were microcosms of the medieval world, a complex mix of power, fear, ritual, and secrecy. They reveal how those who shaped history spent their nights, not in carefree slumber, but in a delicate balance of vigilance, reflection, and strategic action. For the sleepless historian, these spaces are more than architectural curiosities. They are the crucibles where the personality, fears, and ambitions of rulers were forged in the quiet, unpredictable hours of darkness. As we leave the threshold of the royal chambers, we are only beginning to understand the intricate world of medieval nights. In the chapters ahead, we will explore the strange bedtime rituals, the role of superstition, the influence of dreams, and the nocturnal dramas that unfolded in both castle halls and countryside cottages. Each chamber tells a story, each shadow holds a secret, and each night shapes the destinies of those who dared to live and rule in a world where darkness was as powerful as daylight itself. If the royal chambers were the stage, then the nightly rituals of medieval monarchs were the carefully choreographed performances played out in shadowed candlelight. Sleep, while necessary, was rarely approached casually. For kings and queens, the night was a bridge between vulnerability and control, a time when rituals, superstition, and human psychology intersected in ways that might seem peculiar, even obsessive, to modern eyes. The day's public affairs ended, but the responsibilities of rulership did not. Monarchs often adhered to elaborate pre-sleep routines, some meant to ensure safety, others to influence destiny. Consider the act of preparing for bed. It was not merely a matter of removing garments and lying on a mattress. Royal attendants would guide the monarch through multiple layers of clothing, adjusting furs and linens to maintain warmth and comfort. Candles and lanterns were placed with precision, not only for illumination, but to guard against the perceived encroachment of spirits or ill fortune. Herbs, lavender, rosemary, or more exotic imported plants were burned or sprinkled around chambers. Some herbs were believed to ward off disease, others to attract good dreams or divine favor. One of the more fascinating routines involved dreams themselves. Many medieval rulers believed dreams could reveal future events, warnings of treachery, or signs of divine approval or disapproval. Some monarchs employed dream interpreters who would be summoned before sleep, guiding them through visualization exercises, protective prayers, or rituals designed to invite favorable dreams. The idea of good sleep was never just physical, it was metaphysical, a subtle negotiation with fate. Midnight, the most critical period of the night, was often when the monarch's vigilance peaked. It was common for kings to rise at odd hours, checking locks, inspecting hidden doors, or listening for the faintest sound. Some employed secret messengers to relay urgent information, even under the cover of darkness. Queens, in parallel, attended to children, ensured the safety of the chamber, or prepared elixirs and remedies that might be needed before dawn. Night was alive with action, even if the castle seemed quiet to anyone outside the stone walls. Certain rulers practiced what modern historians sometimes call segmented sleep. They would sleep for a few hours, awaken for tasks, then return to bed. During these waking hours, monarchs could pray, consult with advisors, or tend to personal matters. Chroniclers hint at kings pacing the chamber at midnight, reflecting on strategy, sending discreet instructions to loyal subjects, or simply staring into the flickering shadows with a mixture of anxiety and contemplation. Sleep was never uninterrupted. It was punctuated, purposeful, and entwined with the machinery of rulership. The rituals extended to physical care as well. Medieval hygiene, while rudimentary by modern standards, held symbolic importance. Monarchs sometimes bathed before retiring, using scented oils believed to purify the body and protect against malevolent spirits. Even brushing teeth or washing hands carried ritual significance, and failure to follow proper nighttime routines could be interpreted as inviting illness, misfortune, or supernatural attack. The body, mind, and spirit were seen as inseparable, and the night was the period where this connection was most intensely observed. Superstition played a central role. Candles were not only sources of light, but talismans. Their arrangement could influence fortune. Mirrors were sometimes covered, believed to trap spirits or reflections that might harm the sleeper. Certain positions in bed were considered auspicious, and even the orientation of the head or feet could be a matter of careful attention. These practices may seem obsessive or irrational today, but for monarchs navigating a world filled with intrigue and uncertainty, they offered a semblance of control. Food and drink, too, were carefully regulated as part of nightly rituals. Some rulers consumed small quantities of wine or herbal teas to induce calm or fortify alertness. Others avoided heavy meals entirely, fearing indigestion, nightmares, or other disruptions of the fragile balance between rest and wakefulness. Chroniclers often recorded peculiar habits: kings nibbling bread while contemplating letters, queens sipping spiced water while reading messages delivered silently by night attendants. These moments illustrate how every action, no matter how mundane it might seem, was interwoven with vigilance, superstition, and practicality. Prayer and meditation formed another cornerstone of the nocturnal routine. Monarchs sought divine guidance in dreams, protection from evil spirits, and clarity in their decision-making. Some recited prayers aloud. Others whispered mantras under their breath. Religious symbols adorned beds and chamber walls, while small relics were placed strategically to attract favor or ward off misfortune. Sleep itself was not a passive state. It was an engagement with spiritual forces, a negotiation between the human and the divine. Yet not all rituals were calming. Fear was a constant companion. The threat of assassination, poisoning, or betrayal haunted the monarch. Even trusted courtiers could not always be relied upon. Loyalty was fragile, and night was a prime period for conspiracies. Some kings slept with daggers hidden under pillows, or had secret bells and ropes connected to chamber doors to alert guards at the first sign of intrusion. Queens, too, maintained vigilance, often conducting private inspections of corridors and servants' quarters to ensure that the family remained safe. A night was as much about protection as rest. Chroniclers also describe more unusual rituals. Some monarchs would have practice alarms, testing guards or simulating breaches to ensure readiness. Others would engage in solitary reflection, pacing chambers or walking through hidden passages to observe the castle's nocturnal life firsthand. Music, sometimes played softly on lutes or harps, could accompany bedtime, though often with the intention of lulling attendants to sleep while keeping the ruler alert. Each ritual, no matter how small, was part of a delicate balance between security, superstition, health, and power. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of these rituals is how deeply they reflect the inseparability of fear and authority. Night was both a threat and an opportunity. It could expose weakness or reveal secrets, yet it also provided a quiet stage for strategic planning, reflection, and subtle manipulation. Monarchs understood this duality intimately, and their nightly rituals were the tools through which they managed it. In examining these nocturnal routines, we glimpse not only the personal lives of rulers, but also the structure of medieval society itself. Nighttime rituals illuminate hierarchies, demonstrate the centrality of superstition, and reveal the constant tension between human frailty and political necessity. Each action, from arranging candles to pacing chambers, was imbued with purpose, carefully designed to navigate the fragile intersection of power, fear, and survival. As we prepare to move deeper into the nocturnal world of medieval Europe, the next chapters will explore the court's secret dealings, the influence of dreams and superstitions on decisions, and the hidden psychological pressures that shaped rulers' choices. Night was never merely a pause between days. It was a fully realized dimension of medieval life, rich with drama, danger, and intrigue. While the night provided an opportunity for rest and reflection, it was also the perfect veil for intrigue. In the shadowed corridors of medieval castles, power rarely slept. The castle, silent to outsiders, buzzed with clandestine meetings, whispered conspiracies, and subtle gestures that could decide the fate of kingdoms before dawn. For those who understood the pulse of the night, it was a theater where ambition, fear, and cunning intertwined with shadows. Courtiers and advisors were not merely servants of convenience. They were players in an intricate game of loyalty and deception. Alliances were fragile. Whispers in the dark could topple a trusted official, elevate a cunning newcomer, or turn a seemingly loyal ally into a dangerous enemy. Night was when these dynamics were most pronounced. By day, the ruler's authority was visible and unquestioned. By night, the delicate balance of trust and suspicion dominated the castle. The smallest misstep, an overheard word, a misread gesture, a delayed message, could spark catastrophic consequences. Imagine a secret chamber hidden behind a tapestry, barely large enough to hold 2 or 3 people. A lord leans in, his voice barely audible, revealing information about a planned betrayal or foreign alliance. His companion, equally cautious, nods, knowing that walls have ears and the smallest sound could betray them. In these moments, the night itself seemed conspiratorial, pressing upon the participants, testing their courage and cunning. Even the flicker of a candle could betray a presence, or the creak of a floorboard signal an approaching guard. Suspense was never optional. It was woven into the very fabric of nocturnal court life. Rulers themselves often became participants in nocturnal intrigue. Kings would rise to conduct secret meetings with trusted allies, discuss sensitive matters of diplomacy, or make sudden decisions based on incomplete intelligence. Queens, too, were deeply involved, orchestrating political maneuvers from the privacy of their chambers. They employed subtle tactics, coded letters, signals, or quiet visits to servants and messengers to ensure information moved unseen. Every night became a test of wit and patience, as rulers balanced the need for secrecy with the imperative to act decisively. One of the more dangerous aspects of court intrigue was betrayal. Even those closest to the throne were not immune to ambition or fear. Chronicles are filled with stories of conspirators using the cover of night to plan assassinations, kidnap heirs, or steal critical documents. The corridors, staircases, and hidden passageways of castles were prime arenas for these secretive operations. Guards, while vigilant, could be bribed or misled, leaving rulers to rely on intuition, ritual, and constant vigilance. No one could assume safety, not even behind locked doors or guarded chambers. The night also amplified the role of rumor and psychology. A whispered falsehood could spread quickly, creating panic or doubt. Monarchs might awaken suddenly, convinced of danger, only to find their fears unfounded or worse, accurate. Dreams could further complicate perception. A ruler's anxiety might transform a harmless noise into a harbinger of treachery. The human mind, heightened by darkness, hunger, and vigilance, became both a tool and a liability in the game of nocturnal politics. Entertainment at night could also serve strategic purposes. Private music, discreet games, or small feasts allowed rulers to observe allies' behaviors, gauge loyalty, and even extract secrets. Laughter and song were not always mere diversions. They were instruments of psychological insight. A jest could reveal character. A reaction to a story could betray hidden allegiances. and even the placement of seating at a late-night gathering could signal status and influence. These seemingly minor details often had repercussions that echoed far beyond the castle walls. Spies and informants thrived in this environment. Trusted servants might act as covert observers, relaying information between rival factions or ensuring that rumors reached the right ears at the right time. Some monarchs maintained networks of nocturnal intelligence, relying on messages hidden within innocuous items, rolled parchments, folded cloth, or whispered words delivered through secret channels. The night allowed for these subtle manipulations, where observation and silence were more valuable than overt action. Yet, intrigue carried risks. Exposure could mean imprisonment, exile, or death. Courtiers and rulers alike walked a fine line between loyalty and ambition, their decisions shaped as much by fear as by strategy. Even the most confident monarchs were often uncertain in the deep hours of the night, weighing trust against deception, safety against opportunity. Each choice, each whisper, could alter the balance of power within the castle or destabilize the entire kingdom. Religion and superstition intertwined with political maneuvering. Omens, prophetic dreams, and the council of astrologers influenced decisions, particularly under the cover of night. A ruler might delay a planned action until a favorable alignment of stars, or interpret a servant's accidental slip as a sign from the divine. These beliefs, whether genuine or performative, reinforced the stakes of nighttime politics, making every moment unpredictable and fraught with tension. Even the architecture of the castle aided in intrigue. Hidden chambers, secret staircases, and concealed doors were not merely defensive, they were enablers of secrecy. Noble families could maneuver unseen, carrying messages or observing rivals without fear of immediate detection. The night was a cloak, a strategic advantage, and a psychological battleground. It allowed rulers and conspirators alike to manipulate perception, test loyalties, and control outcomes with precision that daylight could never afford. Ultimately, the intrigue of the dark nights reveals the complexity of medieval power. It was not simply about battles or proclamations. It was about psychology, perception, and subtle control. The night offered rulers the ability to act decisively, but it also exposed vulnerabilities, both human and structural. Fear, ambition, and cunning thrived together, creating an environment in which every sound, shadow, and gesture could alter the course of history. As we move forward, the next chapters will explore how these nocturnal dynamics extended beyond politics to personal beliefs, superstitions, and the ever-present influence of dreams. Nighttime in medieval Europe was more than a period of darkness. It was a crucible where strategy, secrecy, and human nature converged, shaping the decisions and destinies of those who dared to rule. If medieval nights were a stage for intrigue and power, they were also a theater of the mind, a place where fears, beliefs, and superstition played out with as much intensity as any political maneuver. The line between reality and imagination was often blurred, and dreams, nightmares, and omens could influence rulers, courtiers, and even commoners in ways that altered the course of history. For the sleepless historian, this aspect of the night is perhaps the most revealing, offering a window into the medieval psyche, where logic, fear, and faith intertwined in the dark hours. Nightmares were not mere inconveniences. They were often interpreted as warnings. Chroniclers frequently noted the dreams of kings and queens, describing visions of betrayal, death, or misfortune that sometimes prompted immediate action. A sudden nightmare could cause a monarch to awaken abruptly, summon advisors, and even postpone or cancel planned meetings. The content of these dreams, whether rational or fantastical, carried weight because it was filtered through a cultural lens that saw the supernatural as real and influential. Astrologers and soothsayers held a powerful role in this nocturnal world. Monarchs would consult them to interpret dreams or predict potential outcomes. Stars, planets, and celestial alignments were believed to influence not only health and fortune, but also the success of political actions. A ruler's anxiety in the dead of night could be soothed or heightened by the reading of a horoscope or the interpretation of a seemingly ordinary event as a divine sign. This reliance on superstition was not a mark of weakness. It was a pragmatic acknowledgement that the world was unpredictable, and unseen forces could tip the balance between survival and disaster. Commoners, too, experienced the night through the lens of superstition. Villagers feared spirits, witches, and malicious entities that might wander under the cover of darkness. Sleep was often accompanied by rituals to ensure protection: a branch of rosemary by the bedside, a prayer whispered into the dark, or a small token buried under the pillow. Stories of night demons, spectral animals, or unexplainable noises were widespread, creating a culture in which fear was a constant companion. These beliefs, whether true or imagined, shaped behavior and decision-making, reinforcing the notion that the night was as dangerous as the battlefield. The architecture of medieval castles and homes also reflected these fears. Heavy doors, iron locks, and hidden chambers were designed not only to defend against human intruders, but to ward off evil spirits. Curtains and tapestries, while decorative, could also be drawn to conceal the sleeper from unseen eyes. Some rulers even maintained charms or amulets at their bedside, believed to protect them from nocturnal malevolence. In essence, the night was never neutral. It was active, alive with both real and imagined threats. Sleep itself was often fragmented by these anxieties. Segmented sleep, described in Part 3, was not just a matter of vigilance or routine. It was a practical adaptation to a world in which dreams could carry meaning and threats could arrive unseen. A king might rise to pray after a disturbing vision. A queen might light additional candles to dispel ominous shadows, or an entire household could wake to respond to a perceived spiritual disturbance. Night was a time when the mind remained hyper-aware, and rest was inseparable from ritual and superstition. Some of the most vivid stories from medieval chronicles involve premonitions of disaster conveyed through dreams. A king might dream of a fallen crown, prompting him to strengthen defenses or eliminate perceived threats. A queen might envision the death of a child, leading her to consult healers, astrologers, or spiritual advisors. These visions, whether prophetic or coincidental, were taken seriously because the medieval mindset saw the supernatural as an active, influencing force. Dreams were not dismissed, they were acted upon, often with real political or personal consequences. The psychological impact of these beliefs was profound. Fear could dominate the mind, shaping behavior in subtle and overt ways. Insomnia, anxiety, and restless pacing were common among rulers and nobility. Even the smallest unexplained sound, a door creaking, a floorboard groaning, the howl of a distant animal, could provoke suspicion or panic. Superstition provided a framework for interpreting these disturbances, giving meaning to what might otherwise be incomprehensible. Herbal remedies and protective rituals were intertwined with superstition. Lavender, sage, and other fragrant herbs were used to encourage calm sleep and ward off nightmares. Religious symbols, crucifixes, holy water, and relics were strategically placed to safeguard the sleeper. Incantations or whispered prayers were believed to strengthen the mind against malevolent forces. These practices were as much psychological as spiritual, reinforcing a sense of control in a world where uncertainty dominated both day and night. Even royal advisors acknowledged the power of superstition in shaping decisions. A ruler disturbed by ominous dreams might delay a military campaign, reassign a trusted official, or strengthen the defenses of a castle. Decisions that might appear arbitrary to modern historians were often responses to psychological, spiritual, or symbolic cues interpreted as significant. Nighttime fears were not trivial. They were integral to governance, influencing policies, alliances, and the survival of dynasties. In the villages and towns beyond the castles, the night was equally influential. People slept lightly, often in groups, keeping watch over livestock and themselves. Folk remedies, charms, and prayers were everyday practices designed to mitigate the uncertainties of darkness. A child's cry could be interpreted as a sign of spiritual unrest. A strange animal could be seen as an omen, and even the pattern of the stars might dictate decisions about planting, travel, or work. Fear and superstition were pervasive, shaping the rhythm of life in a society where the night was alive with unseen forces. By understanding medieval nightmares and superstitions, we gain insight into the inner lives of rulers and commoners alike. These beliefs were not mere folklore. They were functional, influencing behavior, decision-making, and the structure of society. The night was a complex environment in which human psychology, spiritual belief, and social hierarchy converged, revealing a world that was far more vivid, anxious, and symbolic than modern perceptions might suggest. As our journey through the medieval night continues, we will next explore how illness, sudden death, and the fragility of life intersected with these fears and rituals. Night was not just a psychological battleground, it was also a physical one, where disease, plague, and mortality added yet another layer of tension and suspense. Understanding this aspect brings us closer to the full reality of life in the dark, preparing us for the stories that unfold in the cold candlelit hours that shaped the destiny of empires. Night in the medieval world was never merely a time for sleep. It was a realm where fear and fragility intertwined with the physical realities of life. Beyond the intrigue of courts, the whispered conspiracies of corridors, and the restless mind of rulers, lay another, harsher reality, the omnipresent threat of illness and sudden death. In an era without modern medicine, every night held the potential for tragedy, and the darkness itself seemed to amplify vulnerability. For the sleepless historian, understanding these nights means understanding the constant, intimate tension between life and mortality, and how it shaped human behavior in ways both practical and profound. The medieval night was a time when the limits of the human body were laid bare. Disease, poorly understood and often horrifying, claimed lives unpredictably. The common cold, influenza, and infections that today are minor inconveniences could become fatal. Plague outbreaks lurked in towns and villages, spreading silently through poorly ventilated homes, crowded streets, and bustling markets. Yet the night offered no pause from this invisible threat. Those in their beds could fall ill without warning, and the small, flickering lights of a candle might be the last illumination a person ever saw. In castles, illness carried a different set of anxieties. Monarchs and nobility were not immune. In fact, their wealth and status could make them even more susceptible to panic when symptoms appeared. A sudden fever, a cough, or a simple rash could spark alarm among attendants and advisors. Physicians, often using rudimentary methods based on theory and superstition, were summoned to diagnose and treat. Remedies ranged from herbal concoctions to bloodletting, purging, or bizarre rituals intended to expel disease. Each intervention carried risk, and each failure could be fatal. The night was a crucible where human ingenuity collided with the stark limits of medieval knowledge. Death in the night was both sudden and symbolic. Chroniclers recount stories of nobles and monarchs who passed quietly in their chambers, their attendants only discovering the lifeless body at first light. Others describe dramatic, fevered deaths, with the afflicted writhing or speaking incomprehensibly as illness overtook them. Families, servants, and courtiers were forced to respond, immediately preparing the body, performing prayers, and alerting authorities. In this way, the night was a liminal space between life and death, where human perception was heightened, superstition guided action, and emotions ran raw and unchecked. Plague, perhaps the most infamous threat, shaped nocturnal behavior in unique ways. Entire households might isolate themselves to prevent transmission, leaving rooms dark and silent, with only the occasional cough or moan breaking the stillness. The fear of contamination created tension between duty and survival. Monarchs and rulers could not entirely retreat from responsibility. Even while avoiding exposure, they had to make strategic decisions, often receiving updates from messengers who risked their lives traveling at night. In these conditions, sleep became fragmented, vigilance constant, and anxiety pervasive. The night also magnified psychological stress associated with illness and mortality. For the sick, isolation in dimly lit rooms heightened the perception of threat. Shadows appeared larger, noises sharper, and the mind oscillated between hope and despair. Dreams, already a domain of superstition and symbolism, could become nightmarish, blending reality and imagination. Those attending the sick, the attendants, nurses, and family, were similarly affected, burdened by both fear of contagion and the emotional weight of potential loss. The medieval night was, in many ways, a theater of human vulnerability writ large. Monarchs were acutely aware of these risks. Illness could destabilize a kingdom just as much as betrayal or conspiracy. A king or queen falling sick overnight might set off a chain of events, succession anxieties, power struggles, or the rapid elevation of ambitious courtiers. Chroniclers describe rulers pacing their chambers while waiting for news of a beloved child's sudden fever, or consulting astrologers and physicians in the dead of night to divine causes and cures. Every symptom, every cough, could trigger a cascade of decisions that would echo through the realm. The intersection of superstition and disease intensified these fears. Illness was often interpreted as divine punishment, a curse, or the influence of malevolent spirits. Protective rituals became nightly necessities, sprinkling holy water, chanting prayers, placing charms under pillows, or performing small sacrifices to avert misfortune. Even the timing of administering remedies could be influenced by celestial events or omens observed earlier in the day. For the medieval mind, health and morality, body and soul were inseparable, and the night became the crucible in which these anxieties manifested most vividly. Death at night was also intensely communal. In both castles and villages, neighbors, servants, and family members were drawn into the drama. In small communities, the sound of a funeral bell at midnight, or the sudden absence of a familiar light, could evoke fear and speculation. In castles, the passing of a noble might trigger a flurry of activity, servants rearranging chambers, messengers dispatched, and allies informed. Even in sleep, the presence of mortality loomed, influencing decisions, dreams, and behavior. The fragility of life also reinforced nocturnal rituals. Monarchs and nobility often had elaborate contingency plans, such as secret passages, emergency messengers, or hidden weapons, not only for political protection, but to survive sudden outbreaks of illness or the unexpected death of a ruler. Sleep became a controlled, monitored event. Attendants kept watch through the night, ready to respond to signs of distress. Candles were placed strategically, not merely for illumination, but to allow quick action in case of crisis. Night was simultaneously a refuge and a danger zone, where vigilance was a necessity for survival. Even ordinary citizens had to navigate these realities. Villagers slept lightly, often in groups, ready to respond to sudden illness or attacks by predators. Herbs and home remedies were kept near bedsides. Midnight vigils were common during epidemics, and the elderly, sick, or pregnant were watched over carefully. The night was a delicate balance between rest and readiness, shaped by both practical survival and deeply ingrained superstition. In essence, the night in medieval Europe was never passive. It was a realm of heightened awareness, where the fragility of life, the unpredictability of disease, and the ever-present specter of death intertwined with politics, superstition, and daily life. Chroniclers' accounts of midnight deaths, fevered nights, and frantic searches for remedies illustrate the intensity of this experience. These nights shaped not only individual lives, but the broader social, political, and psychological landscape of the era. Understanding illness and death at night illuminates why medieval sleep was fragmented. Rituals were elaborate, and vigilance was constant. The medieval night was a crucible of mortality, a space where human ingenuity, fear, and superstition collided. Those who navigated it successfully maintained power, ensured survival, and shaped history. Those who faltered often disappeared into obscurity or tragedy. As we leave this chapter, the stage is set for a contrasting but equally fascinating aspect of medieval nights: the festivals, music, and entertainment that unfolded after sunset. Even in a world dominated by fear, superstition, and mortality, humans sought joy, distraction, and celebration. The night was both a place of danger and delight, a paradox that reveals the full spectrum of medieval life after dark. Amid the shadows of medieval nights, where intrigue, fear, and disease loomed, there existed another, lighter realm, the world of festivals, music, and entertainment. For all the darkness that enveloped castles and villages, humans still sought joy, distraction, and communal connection under the cover of night. These nocturnal celebrations were complex, reflecting social hierarchies, religious devotion, and cultural identity, yet they also carried undertones of suspense and superstition. To truly understand the medieval night, one must explore this fascinating interplay of festivity and foreboding. Festivals were often tied to the cycles of the church calendar, seasonal change, or local tradition. Candlelit processions, masked dances, and feasts were common during religious holidays like Christmas, All Saints' Day, or Easter vigils. Nobility would host elaborate banquets in the great halls, where tapestries and banners glimmered under the flickering light of hundreds of candles. Music played on lutes, harps, and early wind instruments filled the air, mingling with the murmur of conversation, laughter, and occasional whispers of courtly gossip. Night was transformed into a spectacle of human artistry, a temporary suspension of the fears that dominated daily life. Yet these celebrations were never entirely carefree. The night heightened both the thrill and the danger of such gatherings. Masks and disguises allowed participants to explore hidden desires or act with impunity, but they also obscured identity, making deception possible. Secret alliances could be forged, rivalries ignited, and clandestine meetings arranged under the guise of merriment. Even during festive nights, the specter of intrigue lingered. Nobles had to navigate the festivities with caution, aware that a careless gesture or overheard word could carry political consequences. Entertainment at night also extended to private chambers and smaller gatherings. Queens, princesses, and noblewomen often hosted storytelling sessions, weaving tales of heroes, saints, and mythical creatures. Such stories were not merely for amusement. They served as moral lessons, reflections of societal norms, and subtle instruction in loyalty, courage, and strategy. Children, too, would gather around fires to listen to tales of dragons, witches, and spirits, their imaginations fueled by flickering candlelight and the shadows dancing on stone walls. In this way, storytelling reinforced cultural memory, communal identity, and superstition, all under the cover of night. Music played a central role in these nocturnal rituals. Minstrels and traveling performers would enter great halls, performing songs that ranged from celebratory to hauntingly somber. Some tunes celebrated victories, others mourned recent deaths, and a few carried subtle messages of political commentary or satire. The emotional resonance of music was amplified in candle-lit spaces, with a flickering light created an almost theatrical stage. Guests' moods could shift dramatically with a single note, reminding everyone that even joy in the night was intertwined with human emotion, power, and awareness. Feasts themselves were highly symbolic and carefully orchestrated. Seating arrangements were dictated by rank, and the choice of dishes, presentation, and timing conveyed messages of status and favor. Exotic spices, imported wines, and rare ingredients demonstrated wealth and influence, but also carried potential danger. Food could be poisoned, or a guest's reaction to a dish could be interpreted as a sign of loyalty or the lack thereof. Even during revelry, subtle observation was constant, and the festive night became a dual space of enjoyment and vigilance. Fairs and village celebrations added another dimension to nighttime life. Street performers, jugglers, acrobats, and storytellers created an atmosphere of wonder, often accompanied by small bonfires and lantern-lit stalls. Communities gathered to celebrate harvests, local saints, or seasonal milestones. Yet these gatherings, while joyous, were not devoid of risk. Darkness obscured paths, missteps could be dangerous, and superstitions often dictated behavior. The night amplified both the pleasures and perils of communal entertainment, making every festival a delicate balance of celebration and caution. Superstition intertwined deeply with these nocturnal festivities. Certain dances were believed to ward off evil spirits, masks could protect against curses, and bonfires were lit to purify spaces. Even laughter and music were thought to influence fortune. Attendees approached entertainment with both joy and awareness of the unseen forces that governed their lives. The night, then, was a canvas for both human creativity and deeply ingrained belief systems. For rulers and nobles, nighttime entertainment also provided subtle political utility. Banquets, dances, and games were occasions to gauge loyalty, test alliances, and observe rivals in relaxed circumstances. A jest, a toast, or a glance could reveal hidden intentions. Minstrels sometimes included coded messages in songs, conveying political commentary or secret counsel. Entertainment became both a distraction and a strategic tool, illustrating how even leisure in the night was never entirely innocent. In a world where power was constantly negotiated, children and apprentices experienced the night differently. While they might not attend formal feasts or clandestine councils, their nocturnal experiences were shaped by storytelling, folk festivals, and ritual games. These activities were as instructive as they were entertaining, teaching lessons in morality, courage, and social norms, while embedding the rhythms of communal life into the next generation. Even the simple act of gathering under candlelight to hear a tale was part of a broader social and psychological education, preparing them to navigate both the delights and dangers of adulthood. The paradox of the medieval night becomes clear through these celebrations. It was a time of both fear and joy, secrecy and openness, mortality and delight. Music, storytelling, and feasts offered reprieve from anxieties, yet the underlying tensions of intrigue, superstition, and mortality remained ever present. Nighttime entertainment was a liminal space, a threshold between danger and delight, reality and imagination, fear and celebration. As our exploration continues, the next chapter will examine the role of nocturnal travel, patrols, and the dangers lurking beyond castle walls. Even as humans celebrated, the medieval night remained a realm of uncertainty and peril where every shadow could conceal threat, and every journey after dark carried the potential for adventure or disaster. While castles and villages were filled with intrigue, celebration, and superstition, the medieval night extended far beyond walls and hearths. For those who dared to travel after dusk, the darkness brought a different kind of suspense, one governed by geography, lawlessness, superstition, and the unpredictable movements of both humans and nature. Roads and forests became theaters of danger, and every journey after sunset was a test of courage, preparation, and awareness. Travel in medieval Europe was inherently risky, even during the day. Roads were uneven, bridges could collapse, and travelers were vulnerable to bandits. By night, these dangers multiplied exponentially. Lamp posts were rare. Moonlight and stars often provided the only guidance. Carriages and horseback riders moved cautiously, listening for the faintest sound of pursuit. Even familiar routes became unfamiliar in the dark, as shadows distorted the landscape and distant noises became indistinguishable from approaching threats. For merchants, messengers, and courtiers, a journey at night was a gamble, one that demanded both physical skill and psychological fortitude. Bandits and highwaymen thrived in nocturnal conditions. Forested roads and isolated paths provided perfect cover for those who lived by theft or extortion. Chronicles tell of travelers ambushed at night, sometimes captured, sometimes killed, and sometimes forced to surrender possessions under threat. Castles and towns could not guarantee safety beyond their walls, so vigilance became second nature. Travelers often carried weapons, accompanied by armed guards, or traveled in groups to deter attacks. Even so, the unknown could never be fully controlled. The night was an unpredictable adversary, and survival depended on a combination of planning, luck, and courage. Forests, which dominated much of medieval Europe, added another layer of peril. Trees cast deep, shifting shadows, and the sounds of nocturnal animals, owls, wolves, foxes, could be mistaken for human movement. Some legends claimed more sinister entities, spirits, ghosts, and witches believed to haunt remote woods after dark. Travelers carried amulets, charms, or recited prayers aloud to ward off such supernatural dangers. Fear of the unseen shaped behavior as much as real physical threats. Even a rustling in the undergrowth could send a party into panic, illustrating the intimate interplay between imagination and danger in the medieval night. Bridges and rivers were also sites of risk. Crossing a waterway in darkness required careful navigation. A misstep could lead to drowning, injury, or exposure to attacks from hidden assailants. Ferrymen and locals were often wary of travelers at night, sometimes demanding higher fees or imposing conditions that favored the cautious over the reckless. Nighttime travel demanded not only physical agility, but a keen understanding of human behavior and social expectations. Every encounter carried uncertainty. Couriers and messengers faced unique pressures. Their tasks were often urgent, requiring them to deliver sensitive messages across dangerous terrain. Traveling under cover of darkness allowed speed and secrecy, but also exposed them to heightened risk. Attacked by bandits, delayed by weather, or lost in unfamiliar territory, they had to balance haste with caution. A single error could compromise critical communications, and in some cases, alter political outcomes or endanger lives. The medieval night thus functioned as both facilitator and obstacle, enhancing secrecy while magnifying danger. Even within towns and villages, after-dark life held hazards. Narrow, winding streets were poorly lit, often cobbled with uneven stones. Shadows could conceal criminals or cause accidental injuries. Authorities attempted to enforce curfews or organize watchmen, but enforcement was inconsistent, and the potential for crime remained high. Travelers and residents alike learned to navigate the night with acute awareness, listening for disturbances, observing patterns of light, and relying on intuition developed through experience. Survival demanded a constant negotiation with uncertainty. Weather added another unpredictable layer. Fog, rain, or snow could obscure paths and landmarks, while icy surfaces increased the risk of falls and injuries. Fires, often the only sources of illumination, could be extinguished by wind, leaving travelers in complete darkness. For those journeying after nightfall, preparation was essential. Torches, lanterns, weapons, and knowledge of the terrain were all critical tools. Even minor mistakes could result in disaster. The night was unforgiving, punishing negligence with immediate consequences. Superstition once again intertwined with travel. Certain paths were considered cursed. Travelers avoided them unless necessary. Folklore warned of spirits, wandering souls, or magical beings that could mislead, harm, or curse unwary wanderers. Travelers often carried protective herbs, amulets, or performed prayers before departure. These rituals were not merely symbolic, they shaped the way people moved, the routes they chose, and their strategies for survival. Nighttime in the medieval world was not a neutral backdrop. It was an active participant in human decision-making. Guard duty and patrols were a critical component of nocturnal security. Castles, towns, and even rural estates employed watchmen who patrolled roads, gates, and public spaces. These patrols were a deterrent to crime, but also a psychological anchor, a reminder that the darkness carried both risk and responsibility. Guards relied on keen senses, memorization of terrain, and vigilance to detect threats before they became immediate dangers. Their presence illustrates how the night was a structured, monitored space in which order attempted to hold back chaos. The combination of environmental danger, human threat, and superstition made nocturnal travel an exercise in heightened awareness. Even seasoned travelers reported an increased sense of vulnerability at night, their minds alert to every sound, shadow, and movement. It was a time when courage and caution were inseparable, when survival depended on physical skill, psychological acuity, and a deep understanding of the world's unpredictable rhythms. The medieval night, then, was a complex landscape. Beyond castles and festivals, it encompassed the forests, roads, and waterways that connected people, commerce, and power. Darkness transformed ordinary journeys into perilous adventures, where bandits, animals, spirits, and the elements combined into a tapestry of suspense. For those who navigated it successfully, night could offer opportunity, secrecy, and even strategic advantage. For those unprepared, it was merciless, claiming lives, possessions, and dreams with equal impartiality. As we move toward the next chapter, we will explore the role of night in espionage, secret missions, and the shadowy movements of spies, bridging the dangers of travel with the intrigue that haunted castles and courts. Night was not simply darkness, it was a stage for action, observation, and consequence, shaping both personal fates and the broader sweep of medieval history. While medieval nights were filled with festivals, superstition, and perilous travel, there existed a shadowy dimension known only to the few who operated in secrecy, espionage, and covert missions. In an era without telegraphs, telephones, or modern intelligence networks, the night itself became a tool, a veil under which spies, informants, and couriers moved silently, gathering intelligence, delivering messages, and shaping the destinies of kingdoms. To understand the medieval night fully, one must explore the intricate interplay of secrecy, strategy, and danger that defined espionage after dark. The art of espionage was both subtle and ruthless. Monarchs and nobles relied on networks of trusted agents to provide intelligence about rivals, rebellious subjects, or foreign powers. These networks were complex, often spanning multiple regions, relying on personal loyalty, secrecy, and cunning. Agents traveled under the cover of night, using forests, hidden paths, and unguarded roads to move undetected. Each mission was fraught with risk. Capture could mean imprisonment, torture, or death, while failure could alter the balance of power in courts or on battlefields. Night offered concealment, but also heightened vulnerability. Messengers played a critical role in these covert operations. They delivered letters sealed with wax, often coded with symbols, ciphers, or hidden messages. Some letters were written on thin, translucent parchment, folded so small that they could be swallowed if discovered. Others contained cryptic instructions that required careful interpretation by the recipient. The journey itself was dangerous. Travelers could be intercepted by rival factions, bandits, or inquisitive authorities. Moonless nights were particularly perilous, as darkness concealed both the traveler and the threats that lurked along the path. Courts were rife with spies, both foreign and domestic. A seemingly loyal advisor could be feeding information to a rival kingdom, while a servant might pass overheard conversations to a distant lord. Chroniclers recount tales of spies hidden behind tapestries, disguised as musicians or attendants, observing the movements and secrets of the ruling class. Even the most secure chambers could be compromised, making vigilance and misdirection essential. Masks, secret compartments, and code words became indispensable tools in the pursuit of intelligence. The transmission of secret information often relied on subtle cues. A candle placed in a particular window could signal readiness. The arrangement of objects in a room could communicate approval or warning. Couriers carried physical objects, letters, or coded signals, sometimes using seemingly innocuous items, such as a loaf of bread or a folded piece of cloth, to convey critical intelligence. The night amplified the stakes of these actions. Each shadow could hide an enemy, each sound could signal danger, and every misstep could compromise the mission. Espionage was not limited to human observation. It extended into psychological manipulation. Agents would spread rumors, sow discord, or feed false information to destabilize rivals. A whispered falsehood in a castle hallway could trigger panic, mistrust, or strategic errors. Nighttime was ideal for these subtle operations. The cover of darkness allowed messages to circulate quietly, observations to go unnoticed, and rumors to take root before daylight exposed the truth. The interplay between deception and perception was at its most potent after sunset. Many agents employed disguises and deception to achieve their goals. Women disguised as male servants, children acting as messengers, or foreigners posing as merchants could infiltrate spaces otherwise inaccessible. Some used masks, hoods, or clever alterations of dress to conceal identity. The medieval night, with its dim light and shifting shadows, provided perfect cover. A clever agent could navigate through guard posts, enter restricted chambers, and return without detection, leveraging the environment itself as an accomplice. The use of codes and ciphers further exemplified the sophistication of medieval espionage. Messages were often written in languages unfamiliar to the average reader or encoded with symbols that required a key to interpret. Some kingdoms maintained entire codebooks, while others relied on oral instruction to train trusted agents. Even a single intercepted message could reveal strategic plans, alliances, or betrayals, making the stakes of nighttime communication extraordinarily high. The shadow of discovery hung over every action, intensifying both suspense and danger. Assassination and sabotage were sometimes intertwined with espionage. A spy might infiltrate a castle to disable defenses, poison food or water, or eliminate a target deemed politically dangerous. These operations required precision, courage, and timing, often relying on the darkness to conceal movements and mask intent. Chroniclers describe agents who moved like shadows, entering through secret passages, slipping unseen past guards, and achieving objectives that would have been impossible in daylight. The night was not merely a backdrop, it was an active participant in the mission. Even rulers participated in covert operations from their own chambers. Kings and queens sometimes sent envoys under cover of night to negotiate alliances, gather intelligence, or deliver threats. Some monarchs used feigned ignorance or deliberate deception to test loyalty, employing the night as a controlled environment to observe behavior and gauge intentions. Every interaction was strategic, every action calculated, and every shadow a potential threat. The nocturnal world of espionage blurred the lines between reality and performance, loyalty and deception. Rivalries between kingdoms amplified the intensity of nocturnal espionage. Borders were patrolled, watchtowers staffed, and ambushes set along commonly traveled routes. Couriers had to navigate these obstacles with careful planning, relying on intuition, local knowledge, and sometimes luck. The absence of modern lighting and communication technology made stealth and ingenuity essential. A single miscalculation could result in capture, torture, or death, emphasizing how high the stakes truly were. Superstition continued to play a role in these operations. Some spies carried charms, performed prayers, or relied on omens to guide decisions. Belief in spirits, divine favor, or cursed places influenced routes, timing, and methods. A moonless night might be considered auspicious for certain actions, while a night illuminated by an unusually bright moon might be deemed risky. Even agents operating on rational objectives were influenced by the pervasive supernatural worldview of the era. The psychological demands of nocturnal espionage were immense. Agents faced constant stress, uncertainty, and fear of detection. Every step required acute awareness. Every sound, shadow, or flicker of candlelight had the potential to betray them. Sleep was rare, meals were irregular, and the mind remained alert, processing danger and opportunity simultaneously. Chroniclers describe spies who endured exhaustion, hunger, and terror, yet succeeded through a combination of skill, patience, and resilience. The night tested not only physical ability, but mental fortitude. Communication within espionage networks relied heavily on trust and redundancy. Messages were often passed through multiple agents to ensure delivery, and critical intelligence was confirmed through multiple sources. Agents operated in cells to reduce risk. A captured spy could not reveal the entire network. This decentralized approach enhanced security, but also required extraordinary discipline and coordination, particularly when operating in the dangerous, unpredictable conditions of nighttime travel. Even today, the ingenuity of medieval espionage is remarkable. Without modern technology, individuals relied on observation, memory, code, and subterfuge to gather and transmit information that could determine the fate of empires. The night, with its shadows, silence, and uncertainty, was a crucial ally. It allowed espionage to flourish in ways impossible in full daylight, shaping political, military, and social outcomes in profound and often invisible ways. The medieval night, therefore, was a crucible of strategy, secrecy, and suspense. From spies and couriers to rulers manipulating perception and alliances, the hours after sunset were as critical to the survival of kingdoms as battles fought in the open field. Danger, opportunity, and ingenuity coexisted, creating a world in which every shadow could conceal friend or foe, every sound could signify a threat, and every decision carried the weight of consequence. As we approach the final chapter of this journey, the next section will explore the ultimate culmination of these nocturnal forces, the intersection of night, ritual, fear, and power in the lives of medieval rulers, synthesizing the intrigue, superstition, peril, and celebration that defined the medieval night. It is here that the night reveals its fullest complexity, where life, death, joy, and danger coexist in a delicate, mesmerizing balance. The medieval night was not a simple span of darkness between days. It was a living, breathing realm, a theater in which human experience played out with unparalleled intensity. From restless rulers to commoners steeped in superstition, from travelers navigating treacherous paths to spies orchestrating covert operations, the night was a crucible in which life, death, joy, fear, and power collided. It is in the final hours of our exploration that the full tapestry of the medieval night comes into view, a complex interplay of ritual, human psychology, danger, and wonder. For rulers, the night was both refuge and battlefield. Castles, with their towering walls, secret passages, and guarded chambers, offered protection, but they also amplified responsibility and vulnerability. Monarchs and nobles were rarely alone in their contemplations. Advisors, astrologers, and attendants hovered, ready to act on the first signs of trouble. Nighttime became a period of reflection, consultation, and often decisive action. A king pacing his chamber, a queen lighting candles and whispering prayers, or a ruler consulting coded letters, all these were integral components of governance, enacted under the shadow of darkness. The psychological demands on rulers were immense. Dreams and nightmares, discussed in Part 5, were not dismissed as frivolous. They were signals, warnings, or symbols to be interpreted and acted upon. Illness and mortality, explored in Part 6, constantly reminded rulers of the fragility of life and the impermanence of power. Even in moments of celebration or festivity, discussed in Part 7, there was awareness that every toast, jest, or movement could carry hidden meaning or risk. Night was a period in which thought, emotion, superstition, and strategy converged, and the mental acuity required to navigate it was extraordinary. Superstition, pervasive across all levels of medieval society, exerted a profound influence on behavior. Candles flickered as though responding to unseen forces. Shadows appeared more ominous than they truly were. Every rustle of wind or animal sound could signify danger or blessing. Herbs, charms, and protective rituals were not merely symbolic, they provided comfort, structure, and a psychological framework through which uncertainty could be managed. The night amplified the significance of belief, merging practical survival with spiritual interpretation. Travel and communication, central to political and social life, took on heightened complexity at night. As described, roads, forests, and waterways became treacherous under darkness. Couriers, spies, and merchants relied on skill, courage, and intuition to navigate these spaces. The night transformed ordinary actions into high-stakes endeavors. Every shadow concealed potential danger. Every sound required interpretation. Travelers were perpetually aware that survival depended not only on physical ability, but on the ability to anticipate, deceive, and adapt. Espionage, deception, and intelligence gathering reached their zenith after sunset. Secret missions, coded letters, and covert observation, detailed in Part 9, illustrate how the night became a tool of strategy. Shadowy corridors, hidden staircases, and masked gatherings provided the perfect environment for intrigue. Every whispered word, glance, or gesture carried significance. The medieval night was simultaneously a theater of creativity and a battlefield of wits. Political outcomes were often determined not by armies on open fields, but by actions taken under the veil of darkness. Even commoners experienced the night with intensity. Villagers slept lightly, shared stories around fires, and conducted rituals to protect themselves from real or imagined threats. Nighttime was a period of vigilance, imagination, and community cohesion. Festivals and celebrations offered temporary relief from fear, while the omnipresent threat of disease and mortality reminded them of life's fragility. Sleep, rituals, superstition, and community were inseparable components of life after dark. The interplay between celebration and fear, joy and danger, is perhaps most vividly illustrated in medieval castles during nocturnal feasts or festivals. As described in Part 7, banquets were spaces of both delight and vigilance. Music, dance, and storytelling provided emotional release, moral instruction, and social bonding. Yet even in these moments, participants were acutely aware of the potential for political intrigue, espionage, or sudden misfortune. The night, therefore, was a stage where human behavior was amplified, sharpened, and complicated by both internal and external pressures. Illness and mortality remained omnipresent, casting a shadow over even the most joyous nights. The fear of plague, sudden fever, or unexpected death created a heightened state of awareness. Monarchs and subjects alike adapted their routines, balancing celebration with precaution, rest with vigilance. Nighttime was a constant negotiation between enjoying life and mitigating risk, a negotiation that shaped sleep patterns, social behavior, and daily decision-making. The architecture and physical environment of medieval life reinforced these dynamics. Castles, fortified homes, and watchtowers provided security, but also amplified awareness of vulnerability. Narrow corridors, hidden chambers, and guarded gates created both protection and opportunity. Shadows could conceal spies, bandits, or supernatural threats, making the physical landscape a critical component of nocturnal experience. The night transformed familiar spaces into landscapes of heightened possibility, danger, and suspense. Religion and ritual infused the medieval night with additional layers of meaning. Prayers, candle lighting, and ceremonial observances connected individuals to spiritual forces, provided solace, and framed the uncertainties of life within a divine context. Religious calendars dictated periods of vigilance, fasting, or festivity, while sacred symbols and relics offered protection and reassurance. The night was both temporal and spiritual, a bridge between the material and the metaphysical. The cumulative effect of all these nocturnal forces, fear, superstition, celebration, travel, espionage, and mortality, was a society uniquely attuned to the rhythms of darkness. People developed skills, rituals, and awareness that allowed them to navigate a world in which night was simultaneously friend and foe. Knowledge of terrain, human psychology, superstition, and strategic thinking became as essential as physical strength or martial skill. Night was an education, a test, and a crucible of human experience. Even minor actions could carry extraordinary significance. A candle extinguished too soon, a whispered conversation overheard, or a misstep on a forest path could have consequences that echoed through households, courts, and kingdoms. The medieval night magnified both small and large actions, transforming ordinary decisions into events with profound implications. It was a period in which observation, cunning, and adaptability were not optional, but necessary for survival and success. Sleep itself remained a complex and fragile state. Segmental sleep, interrupted by dreams, nightmares, illness, or vigilance, reflected both environmental pressures and cultural practices. Sleep was entwined with superstition, ritual, and strategy, making it both restorative and perilous. To navigate the medieval night was to master the delicate balance between rest, awareness, and preparation, a balance that shaped the lives, choices, and fates of individuals across social strata. Ultimately, the medieval night was a mirror of humanity itself. It contained our fears and joys, our ingenuity and vulnerability, our capacity for celebration and cruelty. It was a realm where the physical, psychological, and spiritual converged, a space in which the minutiae of daily life intertwined with the grand sweep of history. Whether pacing in a castle chamber, navigating a treacherous road, whispering coded messages, or dancing at a festival, people lived under the profound awareness that the night was alive, watching, influencing, and shaping destiny. For the sleepless historian, the medieval night offers an unparalleled window into human experience. It reminds us that darkness was never empty. It was charged with energy, meaning, and consequence. It challenges modern assumptions about past societies, revealing a world in which life after sunset was as intense, strategic, and fraught with possibility as the hours under the sun. Fear, celebration, vigilance, and ingenuity all existed simultaneously, creating a complex, mesmerizing, and unforgettable landscape. As our exploration concludes, it is clear that the medieval night was more than a temporal period. It was a dimension of human existence. From dreams to danger, from espionage to festivity, from illness to survival, the night shaped medieval life in every aspect. Its lessons resonate even today. Vigilance, adaptability, understanding of human psychology, and awareness of unseen forces remained essential in navigating any complex, uncertain world. In the medieval night, we see the extraordinary interplay of the ordinary and the extraordinary, the human and the mystical, the tangible and the unseen, a timeless, unforgettable testament to the power of darkness to illuminate life itself.